Coming up on Arirang News, the defense chiefs of South Korea and the United States meet in Seoul to talk North Korea. They agree that the alliance between Seoul and Washington is strong and that they will continue to enforce sanctions. President Moon Jae-in tells his top officials to give their utmost to efforts to find and save anyone they can after last week's deadly tourist boat sinking in Hungary. And data show South Korea's exports in the first quarter declined by more than those of any other developed country. Playing a large part was the trade war between the U.S. and China. It's 4:00 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on our afternoon broadcast. I'm Devin Whiting. The defense chiefs of South Korea and the U.S. held talks on Monday on North Korea's denuclearization. Before the meeting held in Seoul, acting U.S. Secretary of Defense Patrick Shanahan said the ironclad 70-year alliance between South Korea and the U.S. remains unchanged and serves as a linchpin for peace and security on the Korean Peninsula and in Northeast Asia. He said the two allies will continue to monitor challenges North Korea poses to mutual safety, and that the combined forces are ready to stand united in enforcing sanctions against Pyongyang until the regime complies with international obligations. Shanahan also said steps are being taken for the envisioned transition of wartime operational control from Washington to Seoul. Now, once OPCON eventually takes place, the defense chiefs have agreed this future joint command will be led by a 4-star South Korean general. That's a post separate from the existing Combined Forces Command, which is currently led by a 4-star American general. Also, they've agreed to relocate the ROK U.S. Combined Forces Command headquarters, currently in Seoul, to Camp Humphreys in Pyeongtaek, south of the capital. These changes were in a joint statement released Monday by Seoul's defense ministry, which said the relocation decision took into account factors such as operational requirements, transfer costs, and time. The two sides agreed to run a working group to flesh out the details for the relocation, including the timing, costs, as well as the remodeling of the new headquarters. The allies had initially planned to keep the headquarters in Seoul at the defense ministry compound. President Moon Jae-in has again called for non-stop efforts in the search in Hungary for the Koreans still missing from last week's boat accident. He also asked for lawmakers in parliament to quickly get back to business and discuss the supplementary budget bill. Park Hee-jun reports.
President Moon Jae-in says no effort should be spared in the search and recovery efforts for the South Koreans who are still missing after a cruise boat sank on the Danube River last week.
정부는 모든 외교 채널과 가능한 물적, 인적 자원을 총동원해 마지막까지 최선의 노력을 다할 것입니다. 또한 헝가리 정부와 협력해서 사고 원인 규명에도 빈틈이 없도록 하겠습니다. 각 부처는 사고 수습이 마무리될 때까지 긴밀히 협력하며 할 수 있는 노력을 다해 주기 바랍니다.
During a weekly meeting with his top aides on Monday, President Moon offered his sincere condolences. He emphasized the need for extra care for the victims' families, both in Korea and Hungary. He also called on the government to keep the families updated on the latest situation while providing the necessary medical and legal support. President Moon also voiced concerns over the lack of progress in normalizing parliament, although 40 days had passed since the government submitted a supplementary budget bill. He reiterated that the National Assembly must promptly get back to work, as there's a growing need to address various economic difficulties.
특히 미중 무역 갈등 등 대외 경제의 불확실성이 확대되고 세계 경제 여건이 빠르게 악화되고 있습니다. 투자와 수출에 어려움이 발생하고 있고 기업과 가계의 경제 심주도 위축되고 있는 상황입니다. 노동시간 단축, 노인 인구 급증과 생산 가능 인구 감소 등의 대내 여건에도 대응해야 합니다.
To revive the economy, he asked for the main political parties to work to discuss pushing ahead with the budget bill in a speedy manner. And he provided a deadline, at least before his trip to Northern Europe, which begins Sunday. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, South Korea's Foreign Minister Kang says she's asked countries near Hungary for their cooperation in the search for the missing. Minister Kang said this in a meeting on Monday about the boat accident. Serbia, Romania, and other countries are known to have promised their active cooperation. Kang highlighted how important it is to seek help from Hungary, saying she was able to better convey the South Korean government's point of view by physically being there. She said she also asked her Hungarian counterpart for continued efforts in the investigation into what caused the accident and the measures taken after that. North Korea's top nuclear negotiator for the past Pyongyang-Washington summits, Kim Yong-chol, has been spotted with Kim Jong-un, despite a report claiming that he had been purged. Pyongyang's state-run Korean Central News Agency reported on Monday that the North Korean leader watched an art performance by the army officers' wives on Sunday, and among the officials that accompanied Kim Jong-un was Kim Yong-chol. South Korean daily, the Chosun Ilbo, had reported last week that Kim Yong-chol was undergoing forced labor and ideological education after the Hanoi summit ended without a deal. Kim lost his post as the head of the regime's United Front Department in April and is now one of the vice chairmen of the North's ruling Workers' Party. Tensions may have risen between the U.S. and Iran, but the Trump administration is saying it's still willing to talk. Hyoyoung reports.
U.S. State Secretary Mike Pompeo said on Sunday that Washington is prepared to talk to Iran with no preconditions about its nuclear program if the country behaves like, quote, a normal nation. This softened stance comes after Iran's President Hassan Rouhani said on Saturday that Iran may be willing to hold talks if Washington showed it respect. But Pompeo also said the U.S. will continue its effort to, quote, fundamentally reverse the malign activity of Iran.
There's real challenges inside of Iran today. They're not caused by our economic sanctions. They're caused by 40 years of the Islamic regime not taking care of its people, instead using their resources to destroy real lives, to use resources to underwrite Hezbollah, to using resources to fight in Syria, where 6 million human beings, 6 million people have been displaced because of Iranian activity in support of the Assad regime there.
President Trump has proposed talks without preconditions since July 2018, before the U.S. imposed sanctions on Iran's oil and financial sectors to squeeze Iran's economy. But Rouhani dismissed the offer as wordplay on Sunday, saying it was up to the U.S. to return to the negotiating table and resume compliance with the 2015 deal. On Saturday, the U.S. military had a B-52 bomber and an aircraft carrier in the region simulate strike operations. The military hardware was dispatched to the Middle East in May, citing credible threats from Iran, to which the U.S. did not offer evidence. Hyoyoung, Arirang News.
In other news, K-pop sensations BTS played Wembley Stadium in London over the weekend, making them the first Korean artists to do so. And it was a performance covered by media around the world. Lee Min-sun tells us more.
BTS's historic concerts at London's Wembley Stadium over the weekend have earned the group attention from all around the world. Being the first Korean artist to take to the stage at the iconic venue, the group performed to some 60,000 fans as part of their world tour. Foreign media outlets also praised the group's performance. Right after the first of BTS's 2 sold-out concerts at the stadium, BBC wrote, BTS have made history by becoming the first South Korean group to headline Wembley Stadium, the third UK show of BTS's career. BBC added that while unlike most Wembley headliners, BTS are not quite household names yet, their fan base is unusually devoted, highly mobilized, and growing daily. CNN also ran a lengthy feature to delve into how a boy band from South Korea became the biggest in the world. CNN compared BTS to legendary band The Beatles, but said the South Korean stars cracking the American market was perhaps an even greater achievement, noting that most of BTS's songs are in Korean and the group has only one fluent English speaker. It also pointed out that the group's active use of social media has built a personal connection with the fan base, giving the group a huge advantage in gaining international fame thanks to their devoted networks of fans around the world. Lee Min-sun, Arirang News.
And another South Korean star is born in golf. Lee Jeong-eun has won her first LPGA title at the big one, the U.S. Women's Open. Our Won Jung-hwan reports.
23-year-old South Korean rookie Lee Jeong-eun won the oldest major championship in women's golf on Sunday at the Country Club of Charleston in South Carolina, becoming the 19th player in history to win their first LPGA title at the U.S. Open. Lee finished at 6 under 278 to beat 3 golfers, including fellow South Korean Lee Jeong-eun, by 2 strokes and take home the $1 million prize money, the largest winner's check in the tournament history. She also received a free pass to compete at the U.S. Open for the next 10 years. Lee is the 10th woman from South Korea to win the championship since Park City's victory in 1998 inspired a whole generation to follow in her footsteps. And South Korea is now seen as a powerhouse in women's golf. Just before the U.S. Open, fellow South Korean Ko Jin-young grabbed first major championship at the ANA Inspiration in April. And with this latest win by Lee, South Koreans have a combined 7 victories in 13 tournaments so far this season. While the rookie's win might have come as a surprise for most people, it was somewhat expected back home. Before taking her talent to the U.S. circuit for this year, Lee has dominated the South Korean tour for the past couple of years, preparing herself to beat the world's best, just like she did on Sunday. 원정환, 아리랑 뉴스.
The U.S.-China trade war is hurting a lot of economies and their exports, and among the hardest hit has been South Korea, as our Ko Jin-hee reports.
With trade tensions threatening to boil over between the world's 2 economic superpowers, a new report shows South Korea's exports decreased the most among the world's major economies in the first 3 months of 2019. According to the OECD's data on international merchandise trade, South Korea's exports plunged 7.1% during the January to March period, compared to the previous quarter. This was the biggest decrease among all G20 countries, an even sharper fall than the drops witnessed in Brazil and Russia. South Korea relies heavily on exports to the U.S. and China, with many local companies shipping intermediary goods to them. From January to May 25th, South Korea's outbound shipments to China accounted for more than 20% of the country's total exports. The figure for the U.S. was more than 12%. So the 2 countries accounted for roughly a third of South Korea's total exports during the period. Import-export figures are especially dangerous for such an export-reliant economy like South Korea. In 2018, South Korea's exports accounted for a whopping 44% of the country's total GDP. The outlook in the near future doesn't look particularly bright either. Government data show the nation's exports tumbled 9.4% on-year in May. Other than the impact of the U.S.-China trade dispute, sluggish semiconductor exports contributed to the slump. South Korea's outbound shipments of chips plummeted more than 30%, mainly due to falling global chip prices and ongoing inventory adjustments at data centers around the world. In a bid to turn things around, the South Korean government aims to devise measures related to the diversification in export products and destinations in the coming months. Ko Jin-hee, Arirang News.
South Korea and the Philippines have begun negotiating a free trade agreement here in Seoul on Monday, with the goal of concluding the talks by November. South Korea's Trade Minister Lee Jeong-eun said the FTA will open up trade and investment opportunities by securing economic partners in Southeast and Northeast Asia. It's also expected to help promote the Moon administration's so-called New Southern Policy. The Philippines is already part of a trade agreement with Seoul through the ASEAN-Korea Free Trade Area, which took effect in 2010. It's now time for an in-depth look at the global markets on this Monday, and for that, I'm joined on the line by Dr. Hwang Se-eun, Research Fellow at the Korea Capital Market Institute. Dr. Hwang, thanks for coming on today.
It is good to be with you today.
Well, last week in the U.S., President Trump threatened Mexico with a 5% tariff if it doesn't stop the flow of illegal migrants to the American border. And that sent stocks on Wall Street down between 1.5%. What happened there, and where do we stand now with markets to open in New York in a few hours?
U.S. stocks extended a weekly loss to the worst since January, while Treasuries rallied a fourth day as the Trump administration trade war intensified. The S&P 500 also kept its worst month of the year, bringing its May decline past 6.5% after President Trump threatened to place escalating tariffs on Mexico. The Dow Jones Industrial Average recorded a sixth weekly loss, the longest slump since the year 2011. The Mexican peso tumbled more than 2%, while the Japanese yen jumped. Trump's Mexico declaration and a report that China is planning to restrict rare earth exports leave markets set for a turbulent end to what's been a rough month for global stocks. Treasuries have benefited from haven demand, with yields on 10-year notes down to 2.15% Friday, compared with 2.50% at the start of the month. There is just a level of unpredictability that I don't think is helpful to the markets.
Well, here in Korea, buyers of Korean stocks now have a lower tax on transactions. It's down to 0.25% on all transactions, of course, irrespective of profit or loss. But the Kospi up today sharply to around the 2060 mark at some points. All the top 10 stocks by market cap saw gains. What were investors looking at today?
South Korean stocks traded higher Monday on gains in tech blue chips. The benchmark Kospi advanced 26.11 points or 1.28% to 2,067 points as of close. The index started on a weak note but rebounded in a late morning trade as foreigners scooped up market heavyweights. Tech blue chips advanced. Top market cap Samsung Electronics gained 3.06%, and major chip maker SK Hynix rose 1.99%. A tax cut for stock trading came into effect today. Analysts are expecting the reduction to enhance stock transactions mildly, along with modest impact on trading volume and price level in the long term. The tax cut is also expected to boost arbitrage trade, a trading tactic that earns profit from price differences between markets by institutional investors. However, from a long-term point of view, trading volume is affected more by market conditions than tax rates for stock transactions.
Well, real quick, the U.S. threat of new tariffs on Mexico affected oil prices as well, which are down sharply. What do you see happening in oil?
West Texas Intermediate crude decreased 5.9% to $53.26 a barrel on Friday, the lowest since February. Front-month Brent crude futures were at $61.16 this morning, down 83 cents or 1.3% below Friday's close. Oil prices extended losses of over 3% from Friday, when crude markets racked up their biggest monthly losses in 6 months amid stalling demand and as trade war fanned fears of global economic slowdown. Oil prices slid on fresh trade worries after U.S. President Donald Trump stoked global trade tensions by threatening tariffs on Mexico, which is one of the largest U.S. trade partners and major supplier of crude oil. The U.S.-China trade dispute remains most critical to the global growth outlook, but the addition of trade tensions between the U.S. and Mexico raised the slower demand picture for the crude oil. However, I expect the additional sizable price fall is less likely to occur, while the market may experience high price volatility for the time being.
Got it. All right, Dr. Hwang, that's where we'll have to leave it today. Thanks as always for your analysis. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Now, South Korea's finance minister has said that it's time to start government-level discussions on raising the legal retirement age because of the rapidly aging population. Currently, the retirement age is 60. Speaking to public broadcaster KBS on Sunday, Minister Hong Nam-ki said the government will announce its stance on the issue within this month after thoroughly discussing it with the Task Force on Population Policies. Minister Hong also touched on the minimum wage issue, saying that the rate of the increase should be minimal next year. In 2019, the minimum wage was raised by more than 10%. The massive volume of plastic waste in the world's oceans has become a huge problem, and South Korea is looking to do its part to drastically cut down the amount of waste plastic in its own waters. Kim Yo-sun reports.
Plastic is estimated to account for 80% of global marine litter. In waters off South Korea, there is estimated to be nearly 120,000 tons of plastic, half of it discarded fishing gear and buoys. As well as harming sea life and contaminating the water, fine plastic only 1 to 5 micrometers in size is a potential risk factor for human beings. The toxins contained in such microplastic are known to be detrimental to human health and may even cause cancer or infertility.
Fine plastic has been found inside marine life and products caught in South Korean waters, while a large amount of plastic was recently found inside a dead turtle. The public is worried.
To tackle the issue, the South Korean government is aiming to reduce marine plastic in South Korean waters by 30% and 50% by 2022 and 2030, respectively. Starting in 2021, the government will initiate a deposit system for fishing gear and buoys and set up collection zones at major ports. It also plans to substitute styrofoam buoys with eco-friendly materials while making efforts to make sure river waste doesn't flow into the sea. Kim Yo-sun, Arirang News.
The Seoul Metropolitan Government is going to plant shade trees in 400 spots around the city, like crosswalks and other places where people have to stand in the sun. Along with benches, it says these sites will get more than 600 trees in total by 2022. The project will cost around $335,000 a year until then. By the end of this year, the city plans to finish 113 of the sites. The trees will not only shade people from the sun, they're also expected to improve air quality. It would appear that members of so-called Generation Z, born in the mid-90s or later, have shopping habits different from the older generation, steered to a large degree by influencers on social media. In part 2 of a 3-part series on Generation Z, Kim Da-mi looks at what they're buying and how that's influenced.
Tea bags for brewing ramen and fish cake broth rather than tea have made it onto Generation Z's shopping list. When shopping for food, rather than buying regular milk, they're choosing milk that's flavored like their favorite childhood ice cream. Generation Z have also become funsumers, a combination of the words fun and consumers who value fun and excitement when choosing what to spend their money on, like buying just a sauce from these famously hot noodles. Food is more than just something to eat. Generation Z nowadays looks for fun and new experiences when buying food. For more shopping tips, the so-called digital natives also rely on influencers on social media instead of celebrities. Gen Zers who say they cannot live without YouTube seek and select information from influencers that they possibly see more often than their own relatives. They prefer the influencers' personal reviews and opinions over celebrities' perfect, flawless advertisements.
The influencers they see on social media seem and sound more personal, approachable, and genuine than celebrities because they can actually communicate through likes and comments. Feedback, reactions, or communication with celebrities is almost impossible.
Generation Z is expected to become the largest group of consumers by 2020, and marketers need to take note of their wants and desires. Kim Da-mi, Arirang News.
And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.